Right now, the idea of eating human flesh feels like one of the deepest taboos in existence. But the archaeological record tells a more complicated story, one where cannibalism wasn't always a horror story. Sometimes it was survival, and sometimes, disturbingly, it was a form of respect. In 2016, researchers examining a 15,000-year-old site called Gough's Cave in England found human bones with unmistakable cut marks, the same kind of marks left on animal bones that had been butchered for food. The bones showed evidence of defleshing, marrow extraction, and even chew marks matching human teeth. This wasn't an isolated case of violence. The pattern matched careful, deliberate food processing. But here's what made the discovery stranger. Alongside the butchered bones, archaeologists found skull fragments that had been shaped into cups, carefully carved, smoothed, and polished. Not damaged in anger, crafted with skill. Whoever made these wasn't erasing the dead. They were transforming them into something meant to last. This is where the science gets complicated, because not all ancient cannibalism looked the same. Anthropologists generally separate it into two very different categories: survival cannibalism and ritual cannibalism, and confusing the two changes the entire story. Survival cannibalism is exactly what it sounds like, a desperate last resort during famine, sieges, or isolation, when the alternative was starvation. Historical records from besieged cities, shipwrecked sailors, and stranded expeditions confirm this happened repeatedly throughout human history, driven purely by biological necessity, not belief. Ritual cannibalism is different and far more common in the deep archaeological record than most people realize. Anthropologist Beth Conklin spent years studying the Wari people of the Amazon, who historically practiced a form of ritual cannibalism as an act of mourning. Rather than burying a loved one in the ground, where the body would be left to rot alone, some Wari consumed a small amount of the deceased's remains as a way of honoring them, a belief that decomposition in the earth was disrespectful, while incorporation into the bodies of the living kept the person's essence connected to their community. That reframes the entire question. This wasn't about hunger. It wasn't about violence. It was a different culture's answer to the same question every human society has had to answer. What do you do with someone you loved after they're gone? Genetic evidence adds another layer to this story. A 2015 study published in Nature found that a specific gene variant linked to resistance against prion diseases, the kind of brain disease caused by consuming infected tissue, is unusually widespread across human populations today. Researchers argued this pattern suggests that cannibalism, at some point in our deep evolutionary past, was common enough and widespread enough to leave a lasting genetic fingerprint on the human species as a whole, protecting the descendants of people who practiced it. That's the detail that's easy to miss. This isn't just a story about a few isolated tribes or desperate survival situations. The genetics suggest this behavior may have been happening broadly enough, across enough of our ancestors, that natural selection responded to it. So here's the fuller picture. 15,000 years ago, humans in what's now England were processing their dead for food and shaping their skulls into cups. Amazonian communities, far more recently, consumed small amounts of loved ones' remains not out of hunger, but out of grief and respect. And embedded in human DNA today is a genetic defense that may only make sense if cannibalism was, at some point, a normal part of how some human societies related to death. None of this fits neatly into the horror movie version of cannibalism most people imagine. Some of it was desperation. Some of it was grief, dressed in a form we don't recognize as grief. and some of it is still written into your own genetic code, whether you ever knew it or not.